Interestingly, I mean, everywhere we are going to talk about craft and again talk about a lot of technical things. So I thought, before we discuss further, let us, for a moment, look at some crafts which will challenge the notion of crafts. Is also very important because we are going to discuss all about craft. But at the same time, our mind needs to be challenged. And therefore, I thought it's a nice idea of quick video collections, which will help you to take through. And then we will set the direction for further discussion. So I'm going to introduce you a few slides, very quick slides of videos. Look through it. And then I'm going to tell you what exactly was that.
Artesanía que hacemos aquí en mi comunidad, podemos hacerlo solamente de día, ya que no tenemos luz de noche. Ya con una lámpara que solo necesita de agua salada, ya con esa lámpara podemos tejer, podemos hacer muchas cosas que en el día tal vez no completamos, no terminamos de hacer.
No hay ninguna máquina en el mundo que pueda hacer hoy día todo un dispositivo con un solo alambre. Solamente son ellas, a través de ese conocimiento ancestral de los tejidos, esa dedicación, que logran hacer estas estructuras tan complejas. Mi nombre es Franz Freudenthal, soy médico, cardiólogo pediatra, intervencionista y me dedico a fabricar dispositivos médicos para tratar enfermedades cardíacas. Gracias a estos dispositivos podemos curar hasta un 60% de las enfermedades sin abrir el tórax. El dispositivo avanza por este catéter, llega donde está el defecto cardíaco, se reconfigura, en ese lugar cierra el defecto cardíaco. Yo me encontraba acá, en Bolivia, tenía la tecnología, no tenía máquinas y las personas han venido hacia mí y me han pedido que estaban dispuestas a ayudarme. Las señoras que vienen donde nosotros son aymaras y llevan la capacidad de hacer el tejido en su sangre. Es 60 o 70% de los bolivianos vienen de estas personas originarias.
Eso que está viendo así como una cosita larga.
Estas señoras en el comienzo han sido pacientes nuestros. Hemos tenido algunos pacientes que no hemos logrado tratar, sus hijos. Les hemos explicado la solución y ellas han trabajado con nosotros.
Yo me llamo Verónica Dubiri Balboa. Yo soy una tejedora. Mi mamá me enseñó a tejer desde niña. Nosotros que tejemos los dispositivos ayudan a salvar vidas. Los pequeños es como 3 horas, en los grandes es 1 día y medio, y también en los tejidos se requiere mucha paciencia, cariño, amor al tejido.
Son más de 50,000 pacientes que hemos tratado. Es el conocimiento y la sistematización que traen los ingenieros, más la habilidad y el arte de estos artistas, es que producen estos dispositivos. Para mí es hermoso que estos tejidos ancestrales, junto con tecnología, estén salvando niños. Para mí es un milagro.
Thank you for watching. What was that? We are going to begin policy. And when you look at the policy's first problem, it is that it comes under culture and heritage. That's what we use, right? All over the world, you look at the government definition of craft, comes under culture and heritage. What did you see here? You saw science, you saw technology, you saw engineering, you saw much more than what it is. So my point to everyone is that when we talk about policy, the first foremost thing about craft is, it is not about just art and craft. It is most important part of the complete country's ecosystem. And if we are not able to build these aspects of the craft into the policy, then of course the practice will remain what it has been for last so many decades. So the first argument, first food for thought for this discussion I'm going to initiate with this panel is that what according to them are the things which are lacking into the current policy of crafts into their own countries and regions. They are all from different regions. She's from Oceania, Dr. Alberto is from Latin America, Mr. Otumba is from Africa, and Vikas is, of course, from the North America. So we have, and I'm from Asia. So it's a balanced representation of all the geographic regions which we created for this particular panel. So my first question to all the panelists, and you can start one by one, what are the things you think are to be still integrated in policy first? Because then we will come to the praxis part. What are those things? Do you think that still it need to be part of culture and heritage ministry, as Dr. Koshi was telling about the Ministry of Creative Economy, right, Dr. Koshi? The first one started with the UK. So the first government that started the Department for Creative Economy was in UK. And then it moved to Indonesia and other places. And that's how, it is now expanding across the world, right? So first point which I want to ask you is, in policy, what are the gaps you see from the government perspective? And what is it which needs to be added so that we can strengthen the entire ecosystem of craft? So can I start with you, Lucenia?
Thank you for the question. First of all, I just want to acknowledge Te Tiriti o Waitangi. So this is a policy framework that we in New Zealand shapes how government and institutions and communities are meant to work together. And this is very important for our Indigenous people, as well as our Pacific people in New Zealand. And I guess in terms of making sure that our policies are reflective of our communities, we have to make sure that in our country, our Pacific voices are heard, and that the issues that our Pacific people are facing in terms of wanting to integrate their crafts or develop their delivery of work, our policies need to be reflective of what the issues that they're facing and what they need. And I guess sometimes with policymakers, we don't often see them on the ground with our communities. And I think that's a very important thing for our communities to thrive, to have our policymakers be on the ground to see what the issues are and how they can, use their own expertise through policy to implement their work. Thank you.
Interesting. So she's pointed out two important things. One, that the policy is majorly focused on preservation, because they are saying that they need to stand with their communities, right, and try and save whatever is still remaining. So preservation is the part. But at the same time, you said something more interesting, is disconnect between policy makers and the ground realities. Correct? Now, that is very important, So this is one key takeaway from today's discussion, that how do we really reconnect and not disconnect? Correct? So we move to Dr. Alberto. I will speak now slow, Dr. Alberto, because you have requested me that.
Thank you.
Okay. So coming to you, what is your thinking about the gaps in policy in your region and country?
My region is one thing, my country is another thing, or maybe my country belongs to a region that is, is not very homogeneous. So I think that, the craft, as we think about craft, is it's a productive activity, productive and creative activity. So as we think about a policy to develop this kind of craft, we have to think about these aspects. So it's a means of livelihood also, and in order to sell the craft, because the sustainability is the most important thing of a policy. So for its sustainability, you have to sell craft. That's necessary. And to sell craft, you have to add value to a product. And this is there where heritage, culture, and all these kinds of things come together to add value to a certain product. So I think that it's very complex. It's not very simple, but it's very complex because you have to produce something, but this thing has to tell something. It has to transmit a meaning for the public. I don't know. I'll let
It's
to follow, but
absolutely
enough.
fine because what you talked about is, I mean, what is different from Lucania is you've talked about that how the craft crosses over to different ministries. For example, he's talking about employment. Now that's come under Ministry of Labor and Employment. Then second is you're talking about commerce, which comes under Ministry of Industries and Commerce. So interesting part is craft is also expanding beyond these areas to the different ministry section. Mr. Otumba, what is your take on that?
Thank you very much. I'm going to use my region as a case study on this. First and foremost, we must appreciate that policy is the packaging of a synergy of getting a result. But in most cases, the policies are formulated, but the mandate for deliveries are not carried to the later, which is the biggest issue. But ladies and gentlemen, there's one thing I want to say here today. This sector is the highest employer of labor all over the world. This is the only sector. You don't need a PhD or MSc to bring out a good craft item. It's about creativity. So we need to be deliberate in bringing the policy. And when the policy comes up, who are the people to give the mandate to make sure the policy is captured at the last end? In most times, the policies are full. The mandate is half-baked. That means there's a full policy without a template, and then you never get anything out of it. Then you find out, like you said, what are the problems? The problems become the challenges of that policy. So it's very important for us to set up a standard of a policy who are to implement this policy. Have they implemented it? Have they been able to get results? So that is what we need to take out of this place today. The marriage between policy and the practice. Are we achieving the ultimate result or not? It's important we capture that. Thank you very much.
It's interesting, because you are talking about that policy may not have problems at times, but implementation may have. So which means, policy is only 10% and implementation is 90%. Which means on the ground, if it is not turning that into reality, that it is not going to really fructify. Right? Coming to Vikas. Vikas, what are your thoughts?
I think what my fellow panelists have told, based on that, I think the selling the product and how to sell it, and what Dr. Koshi said, mass production and handicraft. So we have to get them married somehow, right? And take it to a level where people should know, okay, this is a craft item or this is hand done. We have to publicize somehow. We have to market the crafts or the products in a way that people see them every day, people hear about them every day, and then we know, okay, this is something. And then from there, we can use at least 50% or 40% or 60% of the craft, the heritage, or what you call the craft or heritage or culture, somehow into our modern products, so that at least I see that every day on a daily basis. Right? I saw the video, Junichi Arai. I was lucky to meet him in Japan and learn the way he was doing the stainless steel fabrication. But then the final end goal of that craft which he devised or introduced or invented was to make fabrics not only for people to wear, but for animals, for many other usage. He had a list of things, which I don't remember right now. So what I've heard right now, and to make a policy, it might take time. It is a uphill task, but we can do that. And I think we should brainstorm how to the craft. Basically, I should see the crafts on a daily basis. Then I'll remember. Otherwise, we'll come here, we'll sit, we'll talk, we'll appreciate, and then we'll go. So it's just basically preservation and protection. So implementation, execution, usage, that we have to talk, right? That we have to discover somehow. This is what I feel.
Yeah. So one of the critical questions, which brings to the second point of, second point of discussion, is that when the policy is being made, in your experiences in your country, do you think when the policy is being formulated, are all the stakeholders being invited to discuss and develop the policy? Very big question, because when you talk about implementation, government is not going to implement. Any government institution also not going to implement. There are implementers on the ground. Now, are those implementers coming to those meetings, sitting in those dialogues and discussions, and then formulating the policy? So that's my question to all of you. And we again start with.
So in my country, where I'm from, in New Zealand, we understand that our communities have had their own issues and solved their own issues on their own for a long time before the government supported them. So then we see that through this, when we talk about policy implementation, we have to consult with our communities and making sure that these policies that they want to implement are fit for purpose, are culturally appropriate, and that they are accessible for our communities as well. And I think that's an important aspect to make sure that the policies are being implemented well for our communities.
Dr. Alberto, my another question to you is, see, one is somebody's written, right? You write something in English, right? So somebody writes by some understanding, one part. The other person is who's reading it. Now, it is not necessary the person reading it will have the same understanding of what the person who's writing it. How do you solve this communication gap? And this is a part of policy, because policy is always into a document. But when somebody is going to implement it, they will read through those documents, they'll build some understanding in their mind, and that understanding is going to drive the implementation. So how do we solve this gap of communication?
In our case, I personally had the opportunity to conceive a strategic plan for the development of craft in my country. And at that moment, we thought from the very beginning that about the implementation. So in order to conceive the policy, we just consulted all the people who were involved in craft, like a kind of a craft system, I mean, craft people, craft workshops, institutions who work with craft, financing institutions, government institutions, and we met with them. We organized 4 meetings in the country with 50 to 100 people, and we had some sociologists to work with us, and we just talked with them, and we asked them what they were thinking about a strategic plan, what were the main guidelines, and what the main activities and programs. So we consulted everybody before drafting the plan. So after that, we took this information and we began to draft the plan, so the future policy to the craft development in the country. Well, as we have our first draft, we just called them again and gave them the draft for them to give their opinion. When all the plan was approved, it was approved by everybody, but by all the craft system. So in that way, all the policies were known by everybody. So the implementation was quite easy, you know, because
Interesting.
everybody was involved, was committed with
Interesting.
the policy.
So what you're saying is that rather than any individual drafting or organization drafting the whole policy, they work with everybody and everybody puts in
It
the
was
inputs
a
and then you
homework.
collate together and build that as a policy. Interesting. Very, very interesting and very interesting model also to emulate at different places. To Mr. Otumba, there is another critical question of language. So in language. Now in example in your country, right? What language do you use for drafting these policies?
Thank you very much, moderator. Let me first and foremost make it very clear. In every aspect of life, communication is key. Like you said earlier on, you can pass a message to somebody. He may not understand it in depth to what you want to sell. I'll give you a quick example. I took all the commissioners in Nigeria to South Africa. We wanted to do something on wildlife. When we got to South Africa, we went to Mandela's house. Mandela's house is a very small building, but inside Mandela's house, we have over 2,000 tourists waiting to visit Mandela's house. One of the commissioners asked, "Why is everybody here?" That's his understanding. Over 2,000 visitors, tourists, have read about Mandela. He's a great man, great philosopher, etc. And that's why they want to see him. But another person could not understand, why do you want to see somebody that is not living? So there is need for proper communication for them to understand why they need to visit Mandela's house. So in my country, like you rightly said, our general language is English.
Wow.
But you will be unfair if you want to enter the local community to go there with only English. You will never get results. So in that case, we go with about 4 different languages, including Pidgin English that I'm sure most people here may not understand. But that helps us to get the results. So I want to thank the moderator, my prof. Language is key, particularly that in most communities, it's the local people that sell craft. They're not very educated. So, and that's why WCC, World Craft Council, is there to protect the interests of the ordinary craft man and woman through a strategy of integrating everybody coming together as a synergy. So language is key, but the language that will be used in Sri Lanka, in India, in Germany, in Japan, will be different from my community. So if you are coming to my community, you must come with the right language. Quickly, you showed us a film here about 20 years ago. Somebody brought some fabrics to Nigeria. They were beautiful fabrics, but they were black color. In my place, we only use black color if you are going to bury the dead person. So that person has lost a big business. Business is gone. He brought black fabrics to Nigeria. Nobody is going to take you serious. But if you bring blue, this is our national color I'm wearing now. People will go for it. So language and the strategy of communicating with people marries and form a synergy of getting to the right public. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. I think a lot of interesting point. And coming to Vikas, now Canada is on a very critical juncture. North America in general. how do you really connect with the indigenous tribe? You know, you have very limited handful indigenous tribe which is left, and you have interacted with few. What do you see that, what is the basic difference of understanding between what government is doing and what they are actually feeling at the ground?
Canada as a country, they have a lot of respect for the indigenous people and the First Nation people. And before they start any big event, like for example, now the FIFA World Cup is going to take place partially in Canada as well. So before any big event, they do acknowledge the sacrifice and the cordial behavior of the indigenous tribes. So this is how they begin respecting the First Nation people. Apart from that, they have many other bodies which are government authorized and semi-like NGOs as well, like First Peoples Cultural Council, Canadian Heritage, Indigenous Center for Cumulative Effects, etc. So all these institutions or bodies, they typically try to protect the rights of the First Nation people. And in Canada, we have a policy which is based on the law of privacy, and it's a bylaw that the knowledge or the craft or anything, the living style, the government, they don't want to disclose until unless they feel comfortable. The First Nation people feel comfortable. So as Somesh said, I wanted to approach a tribe called Salish, who are from north west of Canada, and they typically do woodwork. For example, just that like a big trunk of tree, they'll just carve it out and make into a canoe or a boat. So this tribe, I've tried to interact with these people, and I got very limited information because they have a body over the community who work into these crafts, and we have to approach that particular body to infiltrate into more details about the policies. Either they are working for their upliftment or just the protection and preservation and stuff like that. So the government is pro. They are for the craft people and the indigenous tribes. But yes, I think the government still has to take some major steps in terms of creating policies and then implementation and then execution and stuff like that. But yes, the indigenous tribes are taken well care of. They have all these yearly and monthly grants, and and they have a lot of respect in Canada. This is what I know.
That's interesting. So also, what you say is when there are organizations with whom you deal and then you reach out to the end craftsmen, which also shows that within this policy framework, there are a lot of barriers being created, which is very interesting. So last set of questions I'm going to ask, and we will end this discussion. My last set of question is on the implementation, because we talked about the policy, we talked about the communication, we talked about the transmission, but the last part is on the implementation. So what are your thoughts? What are your suggestions for making the implementation more meaningful, more productive, and more efficient? And that is what what steps should we take, should we do in those? So again, we're going to begin with Luciana.
In terms of making sure that the implementation stage is well executed, we have to make sure that we build that relationship with our communities and the people that we're working with. That's very important to ensure that their work is being well looked after and well supported. In supporting our communities, we also understand that there's no one size fits all. So we have to ensure that the policies that we want to implement are also flexible to change if needed to as well.
What is the revision time? I mean, if I may ask, suppose you make a policy, right? And you go through it and you feel that there are adaptations needed. How frequently do you evaluate that? Or you just make it and you say, oh, in another 4 years, then we will go and revisit. What is that time frame?
It would be dependent on the consultation with our communities. So it won't be like a rushed process, because we do value the community's input and we want to make sure that we are supporting them well. And yeah, like I said, their voice is important, and we want to make sure that the implementation stage and process is fit for our communities.
So you're saying, from what I gather from your final input, is that you're saying that policy has to be driven by the intimate relationship between the policy maker and the and the implementers. Correct?
Yes.
Right?
We are as someone who works in the government agency, we are enablers. Our communities drive their initiatives, and we have that trust in them to deliver what is suitable for them and what is relatively appropriate and culturally appropriate for them as well.
Interesting. So policy maker, they're saying policy, not policy makers, policy enablers. So they don't become the makers. It's the community that makes the policy, and they enable them to, that's very interesting. It's a very interesting perspective. Coming to Dr. Alberto.
Well, in our case, as I said, we created this strategic plan, and as we were the Ministry of Industry, we created the plan, and at the same time, we were the main implementers of the plan, because we are a public institution, the ministry, so we have the means and the duty to implement what we had at the plan. At the same time, we had other institutions, private ones, and even municipal governments that they know about the plan, and they help us also implement some activities, because the plan finished with different programs that included activities very, very well defined. And then they called us for help to implement, but it was kind of some organic, implementation in all the country. I mean, our country is not very big. It's not Canada, for instance, and it's quite homogeneous. We have a small population, and not very difference between all the parts of the country. So it's very well communicated also. So it was not very difficult for everybody to get connected to us. So the implementation was not very difficult, and everybody knew about this. And but I think that the most important is that everybody knew, and everybody had participated in some aspects of the plan. So it went very smoothly at the moment of the implementation.
So one, interesting point is implementation agency, Dr. Alberto, implementation agency. Now, implementation agency in most of the countries, they say you have to be not-for-profit, you have to be a trust, you have to be a Section 8, company. But in your case, is it also allowed to private players like designers, like retailers, like producers?
But
Does government give them fund for implementation, or they become implementation agency?
We had our plan, and we also worked with designers, for instance, with private institutions, but they were free to get our ideas, or how if they wanted to implement other ideas, or they were free to do whatever they wanted, But if they wanted to add some activities to what we were thinking, okay, they participated with us. And some, for instance, we went to some markets in Europe or in other parts of America, and all of them were invited to participate. But if they wanted to go there by themselves, it's okay also, it's not compulsory to, if they want to participate in our activity, okay. If not, they are free to do whatever they want.
So what you're saying is not company-based implementation agency, but credibility-based implementation agency, which means anybody, it could be NGO, it could be trust, it could be designers, could be company, anybody can, get government support for implementation, right? So this is very unique because, this is very strange in terms of India, If you're not NGO, if you're not trust, you will not get any government support. So that is very hindering because there are so many good players, good people working out there, and they're working for craft sector. but they are not getting government support because this is the barrier, which they have created in policy. They're not going to fund them. So this is very interesting to Mr. Otumba and then to Vikas, and we'll close this session. To you, in terms of implementation, how do you monitor, how do you manage, and how do you document it? Because that's also very important, how do you really revisit, evaluate, and all those kind of things?
Thank you very much. First and foremost, if you want proper implementation, there must be division of labor. Not just everybody jumping on everything. There must be division of labor. And after that, there must be feedback mechanism. Somebody has to give a feedback so you know where the fault of the implementation is coming from. Without that, these two keywords will be having labor without any success story. So I repeat, first and foremost, there must be division of labor. A is to take care of administration, finance, operation, etc. And feedback mechanism will now check those line of actions. If you marry that together, it makes it very simple in administration for you to get implementation perfected and put in the right position, and you can get feedback mechanism for proper reports and results. Thank you very much.
Interesting. So last conversation we'll pick up with Vikas. It is very interesting, but what happens is often we have seen that government gives some money for implementation, and implementation is done on paper. And when you go on the ground, you see nothing. Now, how do you solve that kind of dilemma? Can you suggest something, Vikas, which you have seen from your experience?
Yes, I think suggestion is the right word, because I'm not still in a stage where I can talk about implementation. But in Canada, the moment you reach the airport, starting from the airport, you start seeing, you start feeling the indigenous culture all around you in terms of colors, patterns, motifs, even zebra crossing. Wherever you go, in malls, anywhere, you'll see some kind of some shadows or some patterns you'll always see related to the indigenous art. So the suggestion, what I can offer to my Canadian friends when I go there, when I happen to meet them, is that, as you said, that the crafts people or the craft community has to join hands with designers, with engineers, with people who are into commerce, and then they have to mutually work together to find a way out for the craft to, to implement the craft into various modern products. This is what I can suggest right now.
Interesting. Okay. So, we don't have time for questions. I'm sorry for that, because we have already overlapped a bit in terms of time. So, thank you very much for all your suggestions. And, I'm sure that we are a small community here. You can have individual interaction and discuss more on this. And with this, I would like to invite Sandeep and take it further. Thank you.